Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna. So welcome today to today's reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are continuing reading from verse 5 of second chapter of second canto. Hope you can hear me well today. So we're going to be doing some testing of audio signal. So please bear with us. As always, we're going to start reciting Mahima Stotra of Sanatana Goswami. You have it there on the paper, Lionel. That's we're going to recite that together. Sanskrit. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhantna Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, the only giver of sight to all of the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kaidvanto Ditaditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita. O heir of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Shri, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Naya prema vakshaksharayate sarvanda sarvasegaya Krishnaya namostume. I bow down to you who are supreme. Syllable pours down a flow of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Mad eka bando matsangin mad guru mahadana manishtarak mostate. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin atinicho chataraka hana muncha kadachin mam premna hrit kantayo spuram. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So continuing reading of Srimad Bhagavatam from the Canto 2, Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 2, The Lord in the Heart, verse number 5. Are there no torn clothes lying on the common road? Do the trees which exist for maintaining others no longer give alms in charity? Do they rent for begging or living at the cost of others as a parasite? According to the dictionary, a parasite is a sycophant who lives at the cost of society without making any contribution to that society. The renounced order is meant for contributing substantial to society and not depending on the earnings of the householders. On the contrary, acceptance of alms from the householders by the bona fide mendicant is an opportunity afforded by the saint for the tangible benefit of the donor. In the Sanatana Dharma institution, almsgiving to the mendicant is part of a householder's duty, and it is advised in the scriptures that the householder should treat the mendicants as their family children and should provide them with food, clothing, etc., without being asked. Pseudo-mendicants, therefore, should not take advantage of the charitable disposition of the faithful householders. The first duty of a person in the renounced order of life is to contribute some literary work for the benefit of the human being in order to give him realized direction towards self-realization. Amongst the other duties in the renounced order of life of Sanatana, Srila Rupa and the other Goswamis of Vrindavan, the foremost duty discharged by them was to hold learned discourses amongst themselves at Sevakunja, Vrindavan. That's the spot where Sri Radha Damodar temple was established by Srila Jiva Goswami. The actual Samadhi tombs of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami are laid. And that also, I'm just adding here, where Srila Prabhupada spent many years before going to US. And when you go there, there's still his room preserved as as a site you can go and visit and pay obeisances there. For the benefit of all in human society, they left behind them immense literatures of transcendental importance. Similarly, all the acharyas who voluntarily accepted the renounced order of life aimed at benefiting human society and not at living a comfortable or irresponsible life at the cost of others. However, those who cannot give any contribution should not go to the householders for food, for such mendicants asking bread from the householders are an insult to the highest order. Srila Kadeva Goswami gave this warning especially for those mendicants who adopt this line of profession to solve their economic problems. Such mendicants are in abundance in the age of Kali. When a man becomes a mendicant willfully or by circumstances, he must be of firm faith and conviction that the Supreme Lord is the maintainer of all living beings anywhere in the universe. Why, then, would he neglect the maintenance of a surrendered soul who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord? A common master looks to the necessities of his servant. So how much more would the all-powerful, all-opulent Supreme Lord look after the necessities of life for a fully surrendered soul? The general rule is that a mendicant devotee will accept a simple small loincloth without asking anyone to give it in charity. He simply salvages it from the rejected torn cloth thrown in the street. When he is hungry, he may go to a magnanimous tree which drops fruits, and when he is thirsty, he may drink water from the flowing river. He does not require to live in a comfortable house, but should find a cave in the hills and not be afraid of jungle animals, keeping faith in God, who lives in everyone's heart. The Lord may dictate to tigers and other jungle animals not to disturb his devotee. Haridas Thakur, a great devotee of Lord Sri Chaitanya, used to live in such a cave, and by chance a great venomous snake was a co-partner of the cave. Some admirer of Thakura Haridas, who had to visit the Thakura every day, feared the snake and suggested that Thakura leave that place. Because his devotees were afraid of the snake and they were regularly visiting the cave, Thakura Haridas agreed to the proposal on their account. But as soon as this was settled, the snake actually crawled out of its hole in the cave and left the cave for good before everyone present. By the dictation of the Lord, who lived also within the heart of the snake gave preference to Haridas and decided to leave the place and not disturb him. So this is a tangible example of how the Lord gives protection to a bona fide devotee like Thakur Haridas. According to the regulations of the Sanatana Dharma institution, one is trained from the beginning to depend fully on the protection of the Lord in all circumstances. The path of renunciation is recommended for acceptance by one who is fully accomplished and fully purified in his existence. This stage is described also in the Bhagavad Gita as Daivi Sampat. A human being is required to accumulate Daivi Sampat, or spiritual assets. Otherwise, the next alternative, Asuri Sampat, or material assets, will overcome him disproportionately, and thus one will be forced into the entanglement of different miseries of the material world. A sannyasi should always live alone, without company, and he must be fearless. He should never be afraid of living alone, although he is never alone. The Lord is residing in everyone's heart, and unless one is purified by the prescribed process, one will feel that he is alone. But a man in the renounced order of life must be purified by the process. Thus he will feel the presence of the Lord everywhere and will have nothing to fear, such as being without any company. Everyone can become a fearless and honest person if his very existence is purified by discharging the prescribed duty for each and every order of life. One can become fixed in one's prescribed duty by faithful oral reception of Vedic instructions and assimilation of the essence of Vedic knowledge by devotional service to the Lord. Text 6. Thus being fixed, one must render service unto the Supersoul situated in one's own heart by his omnipotency, because he is the Almighty Personality of Godhead, eternal and unlimited. He is the ultimate goal of life, and by worshipping him, one can end the cause of the conditioned state of existence. Purport. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the all-pervading, omnipresent Supersoul. Therefore, one who is a yogi can worship only him because he is the substance and not illusion. Every living creature is engaging in the service of something else. A living being's constitutional position is to render service, but in the atmosphere of Maya or illusion, or the conditional state of existence, the conditioned soul seeks the service of illusion. A conditioned soul works in the service of his temporary body, bodily relatives like the wife and children, and the necessary paraphernalia for maintaining the body and bodily relations, such as the house, land, wealth, society, and country. But he does not know that all such renderings of service are totally illusory. As we have discussed many times before, this material world is itself an illusion, like a mirage in the desert. In the desert there is an illusion of water, and the foolish animals become entrapped by such an illusion and run after water in the desert, although there is no water at all. But because there is no water in the desert, one does not conclude that there is no water at all. The intelligent person knows well that there is certainly water in the seas and oceans, but such vast reservoirs of water are far, far away from the desert. One should therefore search for water in the vicinity of seas and oceans, and not in the desert. Every one of us is searching after real happiness in life, namely eternal life, eternal or unlimited knowledge, and unending blissful life. But foolish people who have no knowledge of the substance search after the reality of life in the illusion. This material body does not endure eternally, and everything in relation with this temporary body, such as the wife, children, society, and country, also changes along with the change of body. This is called samsara, or repetition of birth, death, old age, and disease. We would like to find a solution for all these problems of life, but we do not know the way. Herein it is suggested that anyone who wants to make an end to these miseries of life, namely repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age, must take to this process of worshipping the Supreme Lord and not others, as it is also ultimately suggested in the Bhagavad Gita. If we at all want to end the cause of our conditioned life, we must take to the worship of Lord Sri Krishna, who is present in everyone's heart by his natural affection for all living beings, who are actually the parts and parcels of the Lord. The baby in the lap of his mother is naturally attached to the mother, and the mother is attached to the child. But when the child grows up and becomes overwhelmed by circumstances, he gradually becomes detached from the mother, although the mother always expects some sort of service from the grown-up child and is equally affectionate toward her child, even though the child is forgetful. Similarly, because we are all part and parcel of the Lord is always affectionate to us, and he always tries to get us back home, back to Godhead. But we, the conditioned souls, do not care for him and run instead after the illusory bodily connections. We must therefore extricate ourselves from all illusory connections of the world and seek reunion with the Lord, trying to render service unto him because he is the ultimate truth. Actually, we are hankering after him as the child seeks the mother. And to search out the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we need not go anywhere else, because the Lord is within our hearts. This does not suggest, however, that we should not go to the places of worship, namely the temples, churches, and mosques. Such holy places of worship are also occupied by the Lord, because the Lord is omnipresent. For the common man, these holy places are centers of learning about the science of God. When the temples are devoid of activities, the people in general become uninterested in such places, and consequently the mass of people gradually become godless, and a godless civilization is the result. Such a hellish civilization artificially increases the conditions of life, and existence becomes intolerable for everyone. The foolish leaders of a godless civilization try to devise various plans to bring about peace and prosperity in the godless world under a patent trademark of materialism. And because such attempts are illusory only, the people elect incompetent, blind leaders, one after another, who are incapable of offering solutions. If we want at all to end this anomaly of a godless civilization, we must follow the principles of revealed scriptures, like the Srimad Bhagavatam, and follow the instructions of a person like Sri Shukadeva Goswami, who has no attraction for material gain. So again, just to repeat, this is Shukadeva Goswami instructing Parikshit Maharaj on his last 7 days in this body, on the banks of the Ganges or Yamuna. Never sure, it's both. So, text 7. Who else but the gross materialists will neglect such transcendental thought and take to the non-permanent names only, seeing the mass of people fallen in the river of suffering as the consequence of accruing the result of their own work? Purport. In the Vedas, it is said that persons who are attached to demigods to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are like the animals who follow the herdsmen even though they are taken to the slaughterhouse. The materialists, like animals, also do not know how they are being misdirected by neglecting the transcendental thought of the Supreme Person. No one can remain vacant of thought. It is said that an idle brain is a devil's workshop, because a person who cannot think in the right way must think of something which may bring about disaster. The materialists are always worshipping some minor demigods, although this is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita. As long as a person is illusioned by material gains, he petitions the respective demigods to draw some particular benefit, which is after all illusory and non-permanent. The enlightened transcendentalist is not captivated by such illusory things. Therefore, he is always absorbed in the transcendental thought of the Supreme in different stages of realization, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In the previous verse, it is suggested that one should think of the Supersoul, which is one step higher than the impersonal thought of Brahman, as it was suggested in the case of contemplating the Virat Rupa of the Personality of Godhead. Intelligent persons who can see properly may look into the general conditions of the living entities who are wandering in a cycle of the is something missing there? I have a word missing. Okay, that's missing in my text, sorry. Who are wandering in the cycle of 4,400,000 species of the, it is said, is that the next sentence? It is said that
as well as in different classes of human beings.
Okay.
Then it is
Okay, that's I have yes. I have the new version. And then last time I saw that some things are there left out. So my apologies. It is said that there is an everlasting belt of water called the river Vaitarani, at the entrance of the Platonic planet of Yamaraj, who punishes sinners in different manners. After being subjected to such sufferings, a sinner is afforded a particular species of life according to his deeds. Such entities as are seen in different varieties of conditioned life. Some of them are in heaven and some are in hell. Some of them are Brahmanas and some of them are misers. But most happy in this world, and all of them are either class A, B, or C prisoners, suffering because of their own deeds. The Lord is impartial to all circumstances of the sufferings of the living entities, but to one who takes shelter at his feet, the Lord gives proper protection, and he takes such a living entity back home, back to himself. Conceive of the personality of Godhead residing within the body in the region of the heart, only 8 inches, hands carrying a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. Purport. The all-pervading personality of Godhead resides Paramatma in the heart of each and every entity. The measurement of the localized personality of Godhead to expand from the ring to the end of the thumb, more than 8 inches. The Lord described in this verse with distribution of different symbols, beginning from the lower right hand up and down to the lower left hand with lotus, wheel of a chariot, conch shell, and club, respectively, called Janardana, or the plenary portion of the Lord who controls the general sense. There are many other forms of it with varied situations of the symbols of lotus, conch shell, etc., and they are differently known as Purushottama, Achyuta, Narasimha, Trivikram, Hrishikesh, Keshava, Madhava, Aniruddha, Yumna, Sankarshana, Sridhar, Vasudev, Janardana, Narayana, Hari, Padmanabha, Vana, Madhusudana, Govinda, Krishna, Vishnumurti, Adokshaja, and quick comment. This is the 2 weeks ago we mentioned. These are the 25 name of the Keshava Namas, they call it. So we have 24 different varieties of Vishnu form. They have 4 weapons, or these form items in different hands. So it's they have Shankar, Shankar, Padma, Gada, and Chakra. Yeah. So potency of 4 is 25. Potency, mathematical way of potency of 4. No. Let's see. You know, Lionel, this mathematics. Anyway, it comes to 24. It's 4 potency of 4. It's 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. That's the potency of a number, I think. Yeah. And 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 4 is 24. Yeah. I think it's called potency. That's potency of a number, but you go to the highest potency of the Lord. So you go back to. So then we continue here. These 24 forms, the localized personality of Godhead, are worshipped in different parts of the planetary system, and in each system there is an incarnation of the Lord having a different Vaikuntha planet in the spiritual sky, which is called the Paravyoma. There are many other hundreds and scores of different forms of the Lord, and each and every one of them has a particular planet in the spiritual sky, of which this material sky is only a fragmental offshoot. The Lord exists as Purusha, or the male enjoyer, although there is no comparing him to any male form in the material world. But all such forms are Advaita, non-different from one another, and each of them is eternally young. The young Lord with 4 hands is nicely decorated, as described below. Next, verse 9. His mouth expresses his happiness. His eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. Text 10. His lotus feet are placed over the walls of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kaustuba jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. Purport. The ornaments, flowers, clothing, and all the other decorations on the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead are identical with the body of the Lord. None of them are made of material ingredients. Otherwise, there would be no chance of their decorating the body of the Lord. As such, the Paravyoma, spiritual variety, also distinguished material variegatedness. Text 11. He is created with an ornamental wreath at his waist, and rings studded with values on his fingers. His leglets, his oiled hair, curling the bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person among all others. As Shukadeva Goswami describes every part of his transcendental beauty, one after another, in order to teach the impersonalist that the Personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee, facility of worship, but is the Supreme Person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiations from the sun. Text. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on the transcendental form of the Lord. The mind can be fixed on him by meditation. Purport. Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the impersonalist undergoes a series of difficult programs on account of his impersonal meditation. But the devotee, due to the Lord's personal service, progresses very easily. Impersonal meditation is therefore a suffering for the impersonalist. Here the devotee has an advantage over the impersonalist philosopher. The impersonalist is doubtful about the personal feature of the Lord, and therefore he always tries to meditate upon something which is not objective. For this reason, there is an authentic statement in the Bhagavatam regarding the positive concentration of the mind on the factual form of the Lord. The process of recommended herein is Bhakti Yoga, or the process of devotional service, after one is liberated from the material conditions. Jnana Yoga is the process of liberation from the material conditions. After one is liberated from the conditions of material existence, that is, when one is nivritta, as previously stated herein, or when one is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of yoga. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga includes yoga, or in other words, the process of devotional service simultaneously serves the purpose of Jnana Yoga. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by the gradual development of pure devotional service. So that's also nicely described in Nectar of Devotion. If someone wants to go, that's Rupa Goswami describing these things in more detail. Meditation on the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, the first step, must show its effect by the grossest type of anartha, which binds the conditioned soul in material existence, is sex desire. And this sex desire usually develops in the union of the male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives, and wealth. When all these are acquired, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and the false sense of egoism, or the sense of myself and mine, becomes prominent. And the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic, and many other unwanted engagements, resembling the foam of the sea waves, which becomes very prominent at one time, and at the next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky. The conditioned soul is encircled by such products, as well as products of sex desire, and therefore Bhakti Yoga leads to gradual evaporation of the sex desire, which is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. Profit, adoration, and distinction. 3 headings. Sex desire is summarized in 3 headings: profit, adoration, distinction. Just repeating, I didn't hear this before. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from such material hankerings based primarily on the sex desire. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. The sex desire is diminished along with its various forms by the process of Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially very well educated. Knowledge means knowing things as they are, and if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. When a conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich, blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Shukadeva Goswami has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping, and shelter, but he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. One who has the sex desire still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to this stage, there is no question of a renounced order of life. So, by the gradual process of devotional service, under the guidance of a proper spiritual master, and following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able to at least to control the gross sex desire before one attempts the renounced order of life effectually. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire, and this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein, beginning from the feet. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Rasa Lila of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc by indulgence in sex life in the name of Bhagavatam. This vilification of Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so-called devotees. One should be free from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of recital of Bhagavatam. Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Yata yata dish cha shudyati vishaya lampatyam tyajati tata tata darayat iti chitta shuddhi taratan menaiva dhyana taratatmayam uktam. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart. The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the 1st and 2nd cantos of the great literatures. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So where we are now? 2nd canto. We are at the Lord's feet. So see if we get purified enough to continue to the next cantos in a few months. So we should all try our best. Let's just continue verse 13. The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. Purport. The process of meditation recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam is not to fix one's attention on something impersonal or void. The meditation should concentrate on the person of the Supreme Godhead, either in his Virat Rupa, the gigantic universal form, or in his Satchit Ananda Vigraha, as described in the scriptures. There are authorized descriptions of Vishnu forms, and there are authorized representations of deities in the temples. Thus one can practice meditating upon the deity, concentrating his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord and gradually rising higher and higher up to his smiling face. According to the Bhagavata school, the Lord's rasa dancing is the smiling face of the Lord. Since it is recommended in this verse that one should gradually progress from the lotus feet up to the smiling face, we shall not jump at once to understand the Lord's pastimes in the rasa dance. It is better to practice concentrating our attention by offering flowers and tulasi to the lotus feet of the Lord. In this way, we gradually become purified by the archana process. We dress the Lord, bathe him, etc., and all these transcendental activities help us purify our existence. When we reach the higher standard of purification, if we see the smiling face of the Lord or hear the rasa dance pastimes of the Lord, then we can relish his activities. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, the rasa dance pastimes are delineated in the 10th canto, chapters 29 to 34. The more one concentrates on the transcendental form of the Lord, either on the lotus feet, the calves, the thighs, or the chest, the more one becomes purified. In this verse, it is clearly stated, the more the intelligence becomes purified, end quote, which means the more one becomes detached from sense gratification. Our intelligence in the present conditioned state of life is impure due to being engaged in sense gratification. The result is meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord will be manifested by one's detachment from sense gratification. Did I say it right? Okay. I thought I missed a sentence. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. So what's the purpose of meditation?
Purification of sense gratification.
So it's good to repeat things are really important. They stand out because it's Kali Yuga. Our mind. I know it's my memory is weak. So the ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. Right? Those who are too engrossed in sense gratification cannot be allowed to participate in archana or to touch the transcendental form of the Radha, Krishna or Vishnu deities. For them, it is better to meditate upon the gigantic Virat Rupa of the Lord, as recommended in the next verse. The impersonalists and the voidists are therefore recommended to meditate upon the universal form of the Lord, whereas the devotees are recommended to meditate on the deity worshipped in the temple. Because the impersonalists and the voidists are not sufficiently purified in their spiritual activities, archana is not meant for them. 14. Unless the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties. Purport. The Supreme Lord is the seer of all worlds, both material and transcendental. In other words, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate beneficiary and enjoyer of all worlds, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. The spiritual world is the manifestation of his internal potency, and the material world is the manifestation of his external potency. The living entities are also his marginal potency, and by their own choice, they can live in either the transcendental or material worlds. The material world is not a fit place for living entities because they are spiritually one with the Lord, and in the material world, the living entities become conditioned by the laws of the material world. The Lord wants all living entities, who are his parts and parcels, to live with him in the transcendental world, and for enlightening conditioned souls in the material world. All the Vedas and the revealed scriptures are there, expressly to recall the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Unfortunately, the conditioned living entities, although suffering continually the threefold miseries of conditioned life, are not very serious about going back to Godhead. It is due to their misguided way of living, complicated by sins and virtues. Some of them who are virtuous by deeds begin to re-establish the lost relation with the Lord, but they are unable to understand the personal feature of the Lord. The real purpose of life is to make contact with the Lord and be engaged in his service. That is the natural position of living entities. But those who are impersonalists and are unable to render any loving service to the Lord have been advised to meditate upon his impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, or universal form. Some way or other, one must try to re-establish one's forgotten relation with the Lord if one at all desires to gain real happiness in life and to reclaim his natural, unfettered condition. For the less intelligent beginners, meditation on the impersonal feature of the Virat Rupa, or universal form of the Lord, will gradually qualify one to rise to personal contact. One is advised herewith to meditate upon the Virat Rupa specified in the previous chapters in order to understand how the different planets, seas, mountains, rivers, birds, beasts, human beings, demigods, and all that we can conceive about different parts and limbs of the Lord's Virat form. This sort of thinking is also a type of meditation on the Absolute Truth, and as soon as such meditation begins, one develops one's godly qualities, and the whole world appears to be a happy and peaceful residence for all the people of the world. Without such meditation on God, either personal or impersonal, all good qualities of the human being become covered with misconceptions regarding his constitutional position, and without such advanced knowledge, the whole world becomes a hell for the human being. So more also about this Virat Rupa form is found in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Text 15. O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the alive air, should control the senses by the mind. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that a person who is totally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and who constantly remembers him at every step, easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into his personal contact. Such devotees do not need to seek an opportune moment to leave the present body. But those who are mixed devotees, alloyed with fruitive action or empiric philosophical speculation, require an opportune moment for quitting this body. For them, the opportune moments are stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Anyone remembers which are those moments? They're like 6 months of the year, and there's like the bright time of the day, etc. I can't remember any others. Bright time of the day, and there's like 6 months in the year, which are the summer months, or spring, summer, anyway, somewhere there. Okay, you check there, 8:23. But these opportune moments are not as important. So you see, it's not important. I don't know. But these opportune moments are not as important as one's being a successful yogi who is able to quit his body as he likes. Such a yogi must be competent to control his senses by the mind. The mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. 16. Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the Superself. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. Purport: the functions of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. When the mind is materialistic or absorbed in material contact, it acts for material advancement of knowledge, destructively ending in discovery of nuclear weapons. But when the mind acts under spiritual urge, it acts wonderfully for going back home, back to Godhead, for life in complete bliss and eternity. Therefore, the mind has to be manipulated by good and unalloyed intelligence. Perfect intelligence is to render service unto the Lord. One should be intelligent enough to understand that the living being is, in all circumstances, a servant of the circumstances. Every living being is serving the dictates of desire, anger, lust, illusion, insanity, and enviousness, all materially affected. But even while executing such dictations of different temperaments, he is perpetually unhappy. When one actually feels this and turns his intelligence to inquiring about it from the right sources, he gets information of the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Instead of serving materially for the above-mentioned different humors of the body, the living entity's intelligence then becomes freed from the unhappy illusion of materialistic temperament, and thus, by unalloyed intelligence, the mind is brought into the service of the Lord. The Lord and His service are identical, being on the absolute plane. Therefore, the unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord, and thus the living entity does not remain a seer himself, but becomes seen by the Lord transcendentally. When the living entity is directly seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire, and when the living entity follows him perfectly, the living entity ceases to discharge any other duty for his illusory satisfaction. In his pure unalloyed state, the living being attains the stage of full bliss, labdopashanti, and ceases all material hankerings. So text 17. In that transcendental state of labdopashanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods, who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures, and what to speak of the demigods themselves. Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. So none of that. Purport: devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods by its manifestations of past, present, and future, does not act on the transcendental plane. The influence of time is exhibited by the symptoms of birth, death, old age, and disease, and these four principles of material conditions are present everywhere in any part of the material cosmos, up to the planet Brahmaloka, where the duration of life of the inhabitants appears to us to be fabulous. Insurmountable time even brings about the death of Brahma, so what to speak of other demigods like Indra, Chandra, Surya, Vayu, and Varuna. The astronomical influence directed by the different demigods over mundane creatures is also conspicuous by its absence. In the material existence, the living entities are afraid of satanic influence, but for a devotee on the transcendental plane, there is no such fear at all. The living entities change their material bodies in different shapes and forms under the influence of the different modes of material nature, but in the transcendental state, the devotee is gunatita, or above the material modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Thus the false ego of I am the Lord of all I survey does not arise there. In the material world, the false ego of the living being trying to lord it over the material nature is something like the moth falling in a blazing fire. The moth is captivated by the glaring beauty of the fire, and when he comes to enjoy it, the blazing fire consumes him. In the transcendental state, the living being is pure in his consciousness, and as such he has no false ego to lord it over the material nature. Rather, his pure consciousness directs him to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlabha. All this indicates that in the transcendental state there is neither material creation nor the causal ocean for material nature. The above-mentioned state of affairs is factual on the transcendental plane, but is factually revealed in the transcendentalists' knowledge of the advanced state of pure consciousness. Such transcendentalists are of two types, namely the impersonalists and the devotees. For the impersonalist, the ultimate goal or destination is the Brahma Jyoti of the spiritual sky, but for the devotees, the ultimate goal is the Vaikuntha planets. The devotees experience the above-mentioned state of affairs by attainment of spiritual forms for activity in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. But the impersonalist, if he is neglecting the association of the Lord, does not develop a spiritual body for spiritual activity, but remains a spiritual spark only, merged in the effulgent spiritual rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is the full-fledged form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, but the formless Brahma Jyoti is simply eternity and knowledge. The Vaikuntha planets are also forms of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. The devoted Lord who are admitted into the abode of the Lord, also bliss, and knowledge. As such, there is no difference between one and another. The Lord's abode, name, fame, and entourage, etc., are of the same transcendental quality, and how this transcendental quality differs from the material world is explained herewith in this verse. In the Bhagavad Gita, three principal subjects have been explained by Lord Sri Krishna, namely Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And reach the Vaikuntha planet by the practice of Bhakti Yoga only. The other two are important in helping one reach the Vaikuntha lokas, although they can, however, conveniently turn to the effulgent Brahma Jyoti as described above. So we can... how long is the purport? We do one more. Text 8. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, Madhama, my abode, is mentioned several times, and according to the version of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, there exists the unlimited spiritual sky, wherein the planets are called Vaikunthas, or the abode of the Personality of Godhead. In that sky, which is far, far beyond the material sky and its sevenfold coverings, there is no need of the sun or the moon, nor is there necessity of electricity for illumination, because the planets are self-illuminating and more brilliant than the material suns. Pure devotees of the Lord are absolutely in harmony with the Personality of Godhead, or in other words, they always think of the Lord as their only dependable friend and well-wisher. They do not care for any mundane creature up to the status of Brahma, the Lord of the universe. only they can definitely have a clear vision of the Vaikuntha planets. Such pure devotees, being perfectly directed by the Supreme Lord, do not create any artificial perplexity in the matter of transcendental understanding by wasting time in discussing what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, or Maya, nor do they falsely think of themselves as one with the Lord, or argue that there is no existence of the Lord separately, or that there is no God at all, or that living beings are themselves God, or that when God incarnates himself, he assumes a material body. Nor do they concern themselves with many obscure speculative theories, which are in actuality so many stumbling blocks on the path of transcendental understanding. Apart from the class of impersonalists or non-devotees, there are also classes who pose themselves as devotees of the Lord, but at heart maintain the idea of salvation by becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. They wrongly manufacture their own way of devotional service by open debauchery and mislead others who are simpletons or devotees like themselves. All these non-devotees and debauchees are, according to Vishwanatha Chakravarti, duratmas, or crooked souls in the dress of Mahatmas, or great souls. Such non-devotees and debauchees are completely excluded from the list of transcendentalists by the presentation of this particular verse by Shukadev Goswami. So the Vaikuntha planets are factually the supreme residential places called the Param Padam. The impersonal Brahma Jyoti is also called the Param Padam due to its being the rays of the Vaikuntha planets, as the sun rays are the rays of the sun. In the Bhagavad Gita it is clearly said that the impersonal Brahma Jyoti rests on the person of the Lord, and because everything rests on the Brahma Jyoti directly and indirectly, everything is generated from the Lord, everything rests on him, and after annihilation, everything is merged in him only. Therefore, nothing is independent of him. A pure devotee of the Lord no longer wastes valuable time in discriminating the Brahman from the non-Brahman, because he knows perfectly well that the Lord Parabrahman, by his Brahman energy, is interwoven in everything, and thus everything is looked upon by a devotee as the property of the Lord. The devotee tries to engage everything in his service and does not create perplexities by falsely lording it over the creation of the Lord. He is so faithful that he engages himself as well as everything else in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In everything, the devotee sees the Lord, and he sees everything in the Lord. The specific disturbance created by a duratma, or crooked soul, is due to his maintaining that the transcendental form of the Lord is something material. So here ends today's reading. You can put your marks there, unless there are any comments. Lionel, do you follow? Everything's okay? Oh, okay. So we'll continue tomorrow then, 6:30, here online and anywhere else.